GenCell Hydrocast, and today with Alex Saucedo, Director of Business Development, USA. Tony and Cozy, how are you, Alex?
Very good, thank you.
Alex, it's been a while that we're together with GenCell, and lately we see a great movement in the US towards utility with challenges. And I know that as being our US person for the last 6 years.
6 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome always to visit us. We'd like to hear your latest news about the challenges, and which we say every challenge is an opportunity that you are facing, and the chances for GenCell to supply the goods or to resolve part of these challenges that the U.S., I think most of states are facing due to changes, climate changes, EV charging, all of these.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Gil. And I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we find in the marketplace today, particularly in the transportation sector, since the U.S. government is really positioning the U.S. to convert or transition their fossil fuel-driven vehicles into electric vehicles. One of the biggest challenges we find is the ability to have the necessary power electrical infrastructure necessary to support EV charging. And I'm not referring to level 1 or level 2 chargers. Those types of assets can typically be found at the home or at the office building, where it's more for residential applications. However, when you start thinking about fleets that do work, somebody like a police, a fire truck, an ambulance, a Amazon vehicle that depends on being able to deliver in time, those types of fleets require constant energy and resiliency, and at the same time you need fast capability to charge those vehicles because time is of the essence. So the beauty about the GenCell product, the EVOX is what we call it,
yes,
is that it solves basically 2 to 3 problems. Okay, the first problem is that the infrastructure that's typically necessary is that you have to have 480 three-phase power at the location.
yes.
Most buildings, most locations in the U.S. don't require that kind of power output.
I understand.
So the challenge is you typically have 12208, which is standard. But you need to upgrade that in order to put in the 120 to 150 kilowatt chargers that are
DC
necessary,
charging.
DC chargers, in order to fulfill the requirements that are necessary for these types of vehicles, but to deliver that amount of power in a very short period of time. It's almost like mimicking your ability to go to the gas station, spend 5-10 minutes at the gas station, and then go on about your way. These types of fleets require that type of process. They can't sit around for 2 to 3 hours waiting.
And the cars, the modern cars, allowing it. They allow it. The modern cars, their batteries allowing fast charging.
Yes, absolutely. So the idea is that since the vast majority of the locations that require this type of power that they don't have, the EVOX basically solves that problem. The way we do that is that we created a hybrid solution to where you're incorporating hydrogen fuel cell technology, which, think of it as a computer that generates power using hydrogen, and also high capacity battery technology. So when you encompass both technologies together, you have a very powerful system.
So it's generation and accumulation.
Correct.
So you can aggregate energy by, let's say, slow charging of the fuel cells until the capacity of the battery getting into a full or 80% full.
Correct.
And then you can dump it at a very high rate, but you need only like 20, 30, 40 kilowatt hour.
Correct.
So if the battery is full enough, it could go 1, 2, 3, like 16, 17, 20 cars.
Correct.
And then when they are off and there is no demand, then the fuel cells are retrieving back the energy to the battery.
Correct. Now, keep in mind that the way when I say a hybrid solution, the reason why we created this way is because we want to also leverage what we currently have at the existing site, which is whatever extra capacity of energy that you have from that facility to help us maintain the state of charge of the battery. Mm-hmm. Okay. However, is that as we talked about the types of fleet that this really resonates for, is that you also have to have a multi-layer redundancy when it comes to energy inputs. So we gave the capability within the EVOX solution to not only get solar power, if you have it available. We have grid power, if you have, well, you should have that available. You could even potentially put in wind. Most people don't, but it's there. And then the default is always hydrogen through the fuel cell.
When you say grid availability, you mean that there is some grid, but not enough.
Correct.
To do the fast charging due to lack of three-phase or to a limited amount of kilowatt that you can retrieve.
Correct. So let me give you an example. So for as an example is that your vehicle shows up. First of all, you don't have 480 three-phase power. So first of all, you have to step up the voltage to 480 volts.
Yes.
Okay, so we solved that problem already. The second challenge is that you don't have that big copper cable to deliver the amount of power you need in order to fulfill that requirement in a fast capacity. So then what we do is if the vehicle shows up and you need 80 kilowatts, but maybe your network or your infrastructure only delivers 40, that means there's a 40 kilowatt delta that you need to fulfill.
Yes.
So we deliver the 480 three-phase power directly from the battery and deliver it directly to the car battery immediately.
At full power.
At full power.
Yes.
And then the 40 kilowatts that we're getting from the grid, we're constantly recharging the battery that we already have, right? So we're still maintaining the state of charge, but it's a balance of plant. So whenever there is a multiple cycles of vehicles coming in and you're discharging, charging, discharging, charging, you have to make sure that you're getting enough power to continuously maintain the charging cycles.
So enough energy.
Enough energy. So what we do is if you happen to have the solar, we can also introduce into the balance of plant energy coming in from the solar to supplement whatever the grid is missing.
So you have
additional capacity.
Some grid, some solar, and then additional, if it's nighttime and no solar panel available.
You can supplement with fuel cell.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
So the whole premise is to make sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket when it comes to energy. Because today, if your only energy input is the grid, and the grid becomes compromised because of a weather event, somebody hits a transformer, whatever the case is, that means you're shut down. And the only power you have left is just the battery. At a certain stage, if you're not recharging the battery, within a couple of cycles, you're right back to square one and you're at zero battery charge.
And where do you see the most importance in the U.S. that you have been exposed to? What are the most crucial points that those kind of EVOX applications could serve?
So some of the ones that I mentioned earlier. So many municipalities today, they're converting their fleets as well, and that's a mandated process not only from the federal government, but many municipalities and cities are actually making that demand as well. So they're converting their police, they're converting their fire trucks, they're converting their ambulances
to electric cars.
To electric cars. And it's a high risk for these types of fleets in the municipalities because, again, in today's environment, typically you only have the grid as your primary power source. And if that becomes compromised, that becomes a huge challenge. Now, the beauty about the EVOX is that now the second component that we solved is how do you regenerate that energy on demand as a generator and refill the energy regardless of the status of the grid. So you can not only just receive energy from the grid, but if for some reason the grid becomes compromised, we can fulfill the requirement of the grid and recharge the battery.
And in cases for those storms that people need to evacuate from their cities and there is no electric power to give them the juice to get into the highway and just run away.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the exposure of EVOX to the municipalities or to the Ministry of Transportation to give this juice along these highways where the infrastructure is limited of the utility?
So one of the things that the U.S. government is doing is they have a national program called the NEVI program.
Mm-hmm.
The NEVI program is where they're providing funding to start implementing EV charging networks, high-capacity, 150 kilowatt-hour chargers along the highway systems, okay? And, the thing is that in Florida in particular, as an example, is that, when you go down the turnpike, there's basically a northbound and southbound, and in the middle, you have these travel centers. And they're pretty much there every 50 miles, okay? but particularly Florida has a very high concentration of electric vehicles. So under a storm, whether hurricane or otherwise, and people would have to evacuate, it can be very problematic not only for the cities, for the government, because of the liability and life safety implications, that if people are having to immediately evacuate, they weren't planning on it, but they're still charging, or I don't know what their state of charge would be, but let's just say they don't have a full charge and they have to get on the highway and start evacuating north or south or whatever it is, they may not have sufficient amount of power to get them all the way up the state line. So every 50 miles, you need to have EV charging that's grid independent.
And fast.
Because, if somebody gets stuck because their car went dead because there's no additional power, they could potentially block the roads, which now everybody behind them now cannot evacuate in a safe manner.
So you need those high speed chargers, which the normal infrastructure probably is not there.
It's not there because typically those gasoline stations typically have the 12208 service.
Okay.
And because it was never intended to put that kind of power, because it's not typically necessary.
And that could be an immediate solution. You don't need any infrastructure, just bring it there.
So the value of what the EVOX does is not only does it upgrade your electrical infrastructure in real time, where you're in a containerized solution that can also be transported to wherever the problem is, but it also gives you the resiliency. But the fact is that what we're really solving is the fact is that a lot of times the utilities are unable to create these upgrades for the customer in a timely fashion. Nationally, we hear that it's 2 to 3 years before they'll even consider, and it's not that they won't consider it, it's just that it's not part of their planning. And they have their 5 to 10 year plan, and if you're not part of that plan, you have to wait your turn. So the challenge is if I need to electrify my fleet and I'm being mandated to do that, this gives you a solution to give you the infrastructure you need and the resiliency you need to make sure that regardless of what's going on with the status, you're not only able to charge, but also make sure that the charging cycles continue to happen regardless of the status of the grid.
That sounds very promising in case that there is an awareness to this solution. So, and this is your job, probably going to those decision makers and tell them, look, we know that you have a problem, and here's our solution. What do you think?
Correct.
What are the initial feedbacks that you get these days?
So the initial feedback is that like everybody wants or needs this type of solution. When I speak with municipalities, when I speak with hospitals, when I speak with people that have fleets that must do work, meaning that they're always on the move and they have to be on the move for whatever the application is, they need this type of solution because, again, what I mentioned is that utilities are unable to give them. But even if you bring in the three-phase power, you still have a resiliency problem because you always have to have a plan B when it comes to power generation. Now, you can always throw in a diesel generator, but that defeats the whole purpose of going electric, right?
You can stay with your gasoline car.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're really going to transition and make the investment and do what you need to do from a green, sustainable way of completing the transportation sector, you need to have a green solution. And the beauty about the hydrogen fuel cell technology is that not only is it more highly reliable than a typical fossil fuel driven generator, but it's zero emissions, no combustion, no noise, no vibrations. It's literally a computer that generates power. This is the type of technology that we're talking about. And it basically, the only byproduct of this technology as it's producing power is pure water. So when you take hydrogen and oxygen and you combine them at the other side of the process, you go right back to H2O.
And they like it.
So there's zero emissions
and they
whatsoever,
like it.
And they love it.
Alex, thank you very much. It's very insightful, and hope you bring him in.
Thank you very much, Gil.
Thanks, and have a safe trip back home.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.